the Mind of Sai Marie. But today I am joined by an author who knows exactly how to weave magic, court intrigue, and the weight of destiny into a single narrative. Tricia Copeland is the award-winning author of over 30 titles, but today we're diving deep into the ethereal and dangerous world of the Fae. Specifically, we're talking about her hit, To Be a Fae Queen. Tricia, it's such a pleasure to have you here today. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Zay.
So, you have an incredibly prolific career, but To Be a Fae Queen has captured a very special place in the hearts of fantasy readers. What was the original seed for Titania's journey, and did she come to you as a queen first, or as a girl just trying to find her place?
She really was a girl just trying to find her place. I saw an advertisement for an anthology, and all the submissions had to have or had to be fantasy stories, a fantasy character with some type of mental health challenge. And the image on the advertisement was this fairy who was hunched in a meadow around these grasses, and she looked scared or anxious. And my mind just started pinging with all these ideas like, why was she scared? Why was she anxious? Who was she? Who was she scared of? And that kind of leapt her onto my page, for lack of a better term.
Sounds like it was an interesting start to a very unique character. So, you've written in many genres, but high fantasy requires a different level of architecture. What were some of the most pivotal moments in your career that led you to feel ready to tackle the Fae realm?
Always knew I wanted to write fantasy, and I never had thought I would write about fairies. My first series was about witches. Well, actually, it started out as a vampire series, but then very quickly pivot into more of a witch series. And I was very comfortable in those realms. But I'd never written about fairies. And the vampire witch series is more of an urban contemporary fantasy. But with the fairies, I just felt like they needed this high fantasy, different world than just living in a human world. So yeah, it's really that image and trying to place Titania and her character in her realm and figure out how she fit into the greater scheme of all the other beings.
So, how has the landscape of indie fantasy changed since you first started, and how do you keep your voice so distinct when the Fae genre is more popular than ever?
Right. So I don't know about indie books in general, I think are more widely recognized as just being books. When I started writing, it was at the beginning of the indie movement, I guess, and a lot of people viewed indie writing as maybe not the same quality, but I think very much it seemed or viewed as on par. As far as fantasy goes and the Fae, I didn't read anything about fairies before I wrote this. And, for better or for worse, my characters and my fairies just took on their own identity. I mean, they have wings, they're not hurt by iron or any other metals. They can tell lies, although they don't usually. So they don't follow any of the major tropes of fairies. And fortunately, no one has flogged me for that.
So, to be a Fae Queen, the politics of the Middle Realm are just as dangerous as the magic. How do you balance the whimsy of a of a fantasy world with the very real, often brutal grit of court life?
I feel like I balanced it with Titania's personality. Like she's 15, she's has trained to be a queen and thought she would, but is kind of handed her crown unexpectedly and is kind of thrown into this role when maybe she thought it would be a couple years down the line. And she's still very much a teenager, for lack of a better term. So she has some rebellious sides, some sides where she's just very obstinate. And I think that really cuts some of the harder or scarier or darker episodes or scenes that we see, or the kind of the peril that she is in many cases. And just seeing that spunk and grit to her is a fun opposition.
So, her path to the throne, rather, is anything but easy. Why do you think readers resonate so much with the underdog turned ruler archetype in your work?
None of us are perfect. All of us have our weaknesses and have our strengths. So if you see that mirrored in other characters, at least for me, it helps me connect with them more. Like I might not have the same weaknesses or strengths as these other characters, but I have some and multiples of them. So to see another character either work around or overcome something that is challenging for them, it inspires me to maybe figure out a way around something that I don't feel is a great strength.
So, for the writers listening, how do you manage the magic systems in your books? Do you have a strict set of rules for what the Fae can and cannot do, or do you let the story just dictate the magic?
Yes, I think you have to set up rules. Well, if you set up rules, you definitely have to follow them. And I think even as me as a reader of fantasy, I don't, it becomes too fantastical if you start breaking all the rules and there are just no rules and everything is willy-nilly. And your characters, if they're limitless, there is no challenge, right? There's nothing to stop them from, or there's no, I guess, thing to work towards sometimes, right? If they were all powerful or they could work around anything, they don't have any obstacles in their path, and maybe it's just too easy. So there's definitely time in my stories when I was like, I want my characters to do this, but I already made the rule of this, and I can't break that rule because readers will definitely come back and say, wait, you said they couldn't do this and then you made them do this, and that's, it's not, it doesn't work. So I think you have to create those, and I definitely did that in the beginning, and like I said, I got myself into some holes that I needed to find another way to get out of.
Well, I mean, it sounds like you're definitely genuine to your craft, and in that you've managed to stay authentic and avoid the performative sides of the industry while still building a massive following. How do you protect your sacred space as a writer while still being accessible to your fans?
Right. Well, I don't love going on TikTok and just doing videos. I feel very weird about how I look and how I come across. And to do them, I will practice them. And then, so it takes a lot of time for me and a lot of energy. And so, as a more introverted person, I think I would rather one-on-one when it feels more intimate. So I have a pretty big email subscriber list, and people email me that way all the time. I'm happy to answer questions over social media messages too, but it seems like most of my messages do come in that email, and that way I can kind of control when I have time to answer them and when it fits into my schedule.
Yeah, those newsletters and emails are usually the simplest way for all of us with consideration to that management. I understand that. So, we are seeing a massive genre takeover in cultural zeitgeist right now, from books to streaming series. As someone who has been building these worlds for years, why do you think we are all so hungry for high fantasy right now?
It's just, well, I can speak for myself. The more complicated the world gets around me, the more I want to escape into my books. So it seems like for me, I've been reading nonstop fantasy since 2020. Give me vampires, witches, fairies, all of those things. And it's a lot more fun to think about all of them in my head rather than thinking about the complicated politics or whatever is going on in the world. So I think it's just something fun for us to think about, somewhere for us to maybe de-stress and just have an enjoyable moment without all those worldly things mashing in our psyches.
Just a little bit of escapism. So, we often talk about the hero's journey, but you write the heroine's ascent. How does gender play into the way power is wielded in your stories?
I feel like gender was just another obstacle for this character. She is the first female monarch in her realm, and she's judged by, the old guard. Um, Not only for being female, but having new progressive ideas within the Fae culture. So they're not sure whether she's strong enough or she can emotionally handle the intensity or mentally, handle all the different aspects of what she needs to do. And they have this little test for her. Well, it's not just for her, for anyone whose rule is challenged. But so I think, it kind of mirrors what all leaders, whatever challenge they face, but definitely for female leaders that kind of come up against this, you don't check every box, right? And I think, nobody can check every box, but sometimes maybe females are seen as not being able to check as many boxes.
I can agree with that. To be a Fae Queen is the perfect entry point for anyone who hasn't experienced your work yet. If you could tell a new reader one thing about what awaits them in Titania's world, what would it be?
Lots of surprises. I love twists and turns and popping things, and lots of different characters, lots of different fantasy beings that are unique. I think a lot of the different enemies and fantasy beings that I bring into this series are a lot of them, plus a lot of unique ones that you don't see in every story. So that's a lot of fun. There's falling in love, there's family drama, there's definitely some fun, heartfelt moments between family. And I guess that comes along more in the series as she gathers her people to her. But I just want people to really enjoy and cheer for Titania and her family and her armies, and then, hope that she perseveres over all of them.
So, what is next for you? Are you going to be staying in the middle realm for a while, or do you have a new shift in genre coming up that we should prepare for?
Yes, so I finished the Realm Chronicles series, book 5, to be a Fae, released last year, and it provided me a pretty good jumping off point. I won't share too much, but we get introduced to a number of new characters. And I have actually a short story coming out pretty soon about one of the characters, Brynja, who is a Nyx. That is a fish shifter character. And so many of my, like Titania's story, coming from a short story into a whole series. Brynja's story is going to be at least one novel. I'm trying to kind of figure out like what her journey is going to be. It might be a trilogy. So I'm still ironing that out. But yes, still staying in this realm, and you might get some more views of Titania as we go along.
That sounds amazing. So, my last question for you, Tricia: what is the one piece of advice that you give to a writer who is currently sitting on a half finished manuscript and is afraid it isn't perfect enough to publish?
I would say just keep writing. When I wrote my first manuscript, it ended up being 160,000 words. I was not a writer. I was not a creative writer. I didn't really, I mean, I knew movies and how movies worked, and I was a reader. Obviously, I sort of knew how plot worked, but I'd never studied it. So, I found a good editor, number one, after completing it, and said, "Here, help me." And they were like, my goodness. So it really read more like a screenplay, and I had to learn how to reformat to have some dialogue, some action, some maybe inner monologue, and how to balance all of those, and how to make sure you had a good plot line, and how to make sure you were keeping the reader engaged. And that manuscript got broken up into my first two books. And it really needed fixing up, which took a lot of work too. But I did it, I think so. I think just finishing your first complete work and then finding people that can really help you shape it up and make it the great product that's going to be readers are going to flock to.
Well, Tricia, thank you so much for joining me today. It has been a true pleasure to explore the layers of your storytelling and the magic that you bring to the page.
Thank you. It's been so fun being with you as well.
So, for the listeners, I have a call to action. Do yourself a favor and head over to Amazon or TriciaCopeland.com right now and grab yourself a copy of To Be a Fae Queen. Whether you are a longtime fantasy fan or you're looking for your next obsession, this is the book you need on your nightstand. Until next time, keep creating, keep dreaming, and remember the mind is the most important story that we will ever tell.